everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Rambler Podcast. Today, I am joined by a very, very special guest, Mr. Mike McCoy, prep class of 1966. Very honored to have him on as a guest. Mike was a 4-sport athlete for the Ramblers. In 1966, he was named All-City, All-State, and Parade Football All-American. He was a 2-time Erie City Wrestling Champion and the PCIAA Pennsylvania State Heavyweight Wrestling Champion as a senior. Mike was also a top performer on the water polo and basketball teams as well. He was recruited by the University of Notre Dame for football, where he played under Coach Ara Parsegian and graduated with a BA in economics. Mike was a consensus All-American and was chosen UPI Lineman of the Year and was 6th in the Heisman Trophy balloting his senior year as a defensive tackle. He was the number 2 overall NFL draft choice by the Green Bay Packers, where he played defensive tackle for them as well. The number 1 overall pick that year was Terry Bradshaw for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He played 11 years in the NFL, 7 with Green Bay, 2 with the Oakland Raiders, and 2 with the New York Giants. Mike received many awards, including the Packers Rookie of the Year, Packers Dodge NFL Man of the Year, Notre Dame Pro Player of the Year, and induction into the Erie Pro Hall of Fame, Cathedral Prep Athletics Hall of Fame, and the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. Mike is a recipient of the Harvey Foster Humanitarian Award by the University of Notre Dame Alumni Association and was inducted into the National Polish American Sports Hall of Fame. Mike was also awarded the Bronco Nagurski Legends Award, which recognizes best of the best of defensive football players in the last 40 years. Mike served on the board of directors of YMCA Camp High Harbor, Camp Hope in Georgia, Pro Athletes Outreach, and Wisconsin Special Olympics. Mike is president of Mike McCoy Ministries. He speaks primarily in Catholic schools across America and speaking abroad from schools in Scotland to prisons in South Africa. He has also been a speaker for the National Catholic Educators Convention, Catholic Men's Rallies, Bill Glass Ministries in prisons, and parents and coaches through the Notre Dame Play Like a Champion program. So, all that to say, we are truly honored to have Mike McCoy on the podcast today. Mike, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, James. It's great to be here, and good to be with you this afternoon. And beautiful Camp Fitch along Lake Erie, where we have family camp the last 36 years as a family. And the people in Erie don't realize what a great facility this is and what's offered not only during the summertime but year-round. And so hopefully through the podcast they may look up Camp Fitch and partake of its great facilities and what this camp is all about.
And I was going to say, talk about timing for the fact that I reached out to you last week and it just so happens you were going to be in Erie, so
right.
Timing couldn't have been more perfect.
Yeah,
and,
it was perfect.
Me driving out here to Camp Fitch to meet with you, I agree. You just pull up to this place, and I thought to myself, wow, I didn't even know this was out here. And you said 36 years, you guys?
We have been family camping here 36 years.
Yeah.
It's right down from Camp Sequoia and Camp Notre Dame, where we used to have our summer camp, football camp, when I was at prep, which is just down the road. So it's kind of in that area. And right down from Peggy Gray's Candies, one of my favorite places at Camp Fitch.
And it was an easy, nice drive out here, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like I said, thanks so much. It's great, on this podcast, I like to talk a little bit about your time at prep. I guess, starting off there, one thing that I thought was pretty funny, I was reading through a little bit about your history of prep and obviously talking about your football accomplishments. Little known fact to some, you didn't even play football till your sophomore year, is that right?
No, I went to St. John's grade school. Yeah. And I was at Holy Trinity grade school for a while, and that's another story. And then I transferred to St. John's, I think when I was in fifth grade.
Yeah.
And the weight limit was 140 pounds for the little Gritter Catholic League, and I was 5'5", 165 pounds in 5th grade, so I was a little bit too heavy. I was just a big kid and trying to survive growing up on East 23rd Street, living with my grandparents. And Father Tellers was our pastor at St. John the Baptist Church on 26th Street, and he comes into the classrooms all the time and says, do you all have a calling to be a priest? I said, okay, I have a calling to be a priest. So in 8th grade, I left. I went to St. Mark's Seminary.
Oh my goodness!
My freshman year.
Wow!
So I was up there studying to be a priest, and it just didn't work out. So my freshman year, I was going to transfer to Academy because prep was full.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time we had 1,200 students, all male. And so I was going to go where my mother went to school, and some of my good friends on the east side, Norm Kuhn and Dr. Abel and all these guys, they all went to Academy, Dave Wiley. So I was heading off to Academy, And somehow I got diverted back to prep. Now the story, I guess, goes is that somebody, I don't know who that somebody is, went into Monsignor McDonald and says there is a seminarian student who wants to transfer to prep. And he said, well, we don't, those seminarian students, I had a 92 average Latin.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize I was 6'3", 240 pounds and wore a size 15 football shoe.
Yeah.
Because I started playing football at the St. Mark's Seminary.
Oh,
which really
okay.
wasn't football, but they had a team, and I put on the pads for the first time. And then all of a sudden I found myself a week before school was going to start going to Cathedral Prep, and it was
They found room for you.
They found room for me. Yes, they found room for me. Now, I also did the shot put and discus, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Water polo didn't last too long. That hurt. That was maybe like a 2-week stint. But basketball, I played also basketball.
Yeah.
With Red Murray.
I can imagine.
It was really too many sports my senior year.
Yeah.
And it hurt me a little bit in the city wrestling championships.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. Which I lost to Tony Truitt, by the way.
Oh, okay.
My senior year.
Yeah.
And I beat Tony earlier, so I'm doing all this other stuff. He's training, and that was a big lesson for me. Because you got to be focused, and I was just not focused on wrestling because I figured, do all these other sports. Coaches wanted me, and I was a people pleaser, and off I go. And then after I lost to Tony, we actually trained together with Everett Eddy and the guys at East High with Bravebender to get ready for states because Catholic schools weren't allowed in the public state playoff, so we had our own. So that was a great time over there, and I was preparing them, and they were preparing me. And Tony went very, very far. I think it's Everett Eddy, or maybe it was Fletcher Carr. I'm not sure, but they won the state, and I won the Catholic state.
Wow, very cool.
So you got to be focused.
Iron sharpens iron, as they say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the focus played into, I'm sure, a lot of your life that we'll start to get into here in some other areas as well. And I know somebody who was a big impact on you is Tony Zambrowski.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about the impact that he had on you?
He was the offensive line coach at the time, and Tom Duff was the head coach. Of course, we had Monsignor McDonald, and you had academic excellence, athletic excellence.
Yeah.
And you can't be perfect, but you can be excellent at what you try to do.
Yeah.
So those characters were instilled with us, plus the faith and the Catholic faith characters were instilled in us every day with our teachers, and Father Donahue was my English teacher, and just everybody at Prep was focused on the character building, focused on education, focused on faith. Started with the top with Monsignor McDonald. He was a tough nut.
Yeah.
And then there was Tony, and when I first saw Tony, I was kind of scared of him.
Yeah.
He's this Polish guy with the big nose and meathead and all that stuff, and got to know him and Ron Costello and Lynn Slatursky and some great guys. But Tony was really the influence because he went to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And my sister was the very first one who went to college. My grandfather was John L. Spraga, and he had Crown Bottling Works in Erie, and my uncle Ed Spraga. So when I was in 4th grade, we moved in with my grandparents, and so we lived with them all the time until I graduated from high school.
Yeah.
And so they're a big influence in my life too, along with my mother
and
my dad in a certain way. He had his situations, but Tony became, I guess, at the time I didn't realize, but a mentor.
Yeah.
And then later on became a friend with Marion and the children, and John and Kiki and Mara and Lauren. And so we've known them for a long time. And then he asked me my junior year where I wanted to go to college, and I said, I have no idea. He said, how about Notre Dame? I said, where's that? I'm serious. I mean, remember we had these black and white TVs.
Yeah.
They didn't show many football games. We had Buffalo Bills and Pittsburgh Steelers and Penn State.
Right.
And so I started focusing on that, and met Johnny Ray and met some of the other coaches that came around and recruiting, and I was very blessed that I was able to go there through Tony's influence, and he and Marion, his wife, drove me out there my junior year for spring football game, unofficial visit.
How cool is that?
Yeah, and met Era Parsegan, and when I met Era and I saw what Notre Dame was all about, all boys school, Catholic school, small college, wasn't big at the time, and the football program was just starting to take off under Era Parsegan.
Yeah.
So I also visited Indiana and Syracuse, but that was about it. I went to Penn State too, and I looked down there, it was like 60,000 people. I said, this overwhelmed me.
A little bit of a big difference between Notre Dame and it sounds
so
like.
I was very, very blessed to be able to go out to Notre Dame, and the influence I had at Prep.
And I was going to ask too, so you were talking a lot about Tony became a mentor of yours.
Yeah.
What would you say for someone listening to this podcast? What's the importance of having a mentor? Why is that important for somebody to have?
Well, I think it's important because mentors are a little bit older than you are, and they've got life experiences, positive and negative, like we all have. And I think if someone who's in their 20s and 30s, if they can see somebody that they look up to, or they see somebody who's successful spiritually or financially, these people really like to give back.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that concept back then.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of different mentoring programs that are out there. And I read some books about businesses that started. Here's my mentors. Even now, some of the big names, they have mentors from these other corporations, and they call and they network. So I think that's very important to have a mentor, and not somebody you hang with, your friends, because they're in the same boat you are.
Right.
What
exactly.
are their life experiences are pretty much yours.
Yeah.
So if you're in the communications business, or you're in the advancement business, you'd want to go to somebody who has been in the business for a long time. Say, how do you do this thing? How do you handle advancement? How do you handle fundraising?
Right.
And I had that with Bill Glass also when I was with Bill Glass Ministries.
Okay.
And he showed me how to run an organization, because I wouldn't be running my own organization today, I don't think, if I didn't have that experience working with a board, working with donors, working with NOS, and working under Bill and how he conducted Bill Glass Ministries.
There's a lot that goes into it that
you
probably didn't know from starting off, right?
It's like training. When we didn't lift weights when I was at Notre Dame, and then the Nautilus came out. And so the guy who developed Nautilus came around, and I said, this guy knows what he's talking about. So, we were up in Green Bay, and they brought all these Nautilus machines in.
Oh, my gosh.
And this is 1972, something like that.
Yeah.
And I, we talked a lot about the physiology and how the body works, how these cams work. And that really helped me with my career. I got injured a lot, like we all do, but the recovery time was a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And so you learn, you're always learning. And I'm even learning today at the age of 73.
Sounds like throughout your career, in many different facets of life, you had different mentors depending on the area that they were specialized in.
Right.
Yeah.
Another one was Johnny Ray at Notre Dame, our defense coordinator, and Joe Yanto, my defensive line coach. And I've been friends with Joe for a long time until he passed away. And Era, Era was able to be a coach, and he was able to keep the line between being a friend but being a coach, and respecting him as a coach, but also understanding that he wants the best for you.
Right.
So when it's 90 degrees out there and he's pushing you, he's not mad at you, he's correcting you.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between positive correction and getting on a person.
So how do you think, somebody listening now, maybe they are starting to be a leader, right? And they're listening to saying, well, how do you know where that line is? How do you know where you have a friendship in maybe a workplace, and how do you know when to push people or be, the boss, so to speak? Where would you say you identify the line?
Well, I think you got to identify the line right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Here's your job description. Here's my job description. I'm a supervisor, and I want to make you as successful as I can as a supervisor. There may be some times that I'm going to come in and say, hey, how about trying this? Or I really don't like what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I'm not attacking you as a person. I am helping you become a better person. So you establish that, I think, right at the beginning, rather than wait down the road a year and you don't like someone's job performance and you come up to them and says, hey, I really don't like your job performance.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. Where's been the evaluation? Where is the evaluation and how that happens? So I think that's established pretty quickly. And I think even at prep, when you got there, you got established. Here's the rules and regulation. Here's your function. Here's how everything works. The teachers, you have your teachers meetings, and the new president seems to be pretty. I haven't met him yet, but what I've seen in some of the podcasts, I guess, that I've seen, he seems to be feeling like this has been a calling for him, which I think is great. Because if it's a job, it's not going to work.
Right.
I don't care what job it is. It's just not going to work.
And I think that's such a key thing that you were talking about as well. I've always kind of picked up on the idea that, this person or what you did wasn't the failure. Maybe what you did wasn't successful in the task you tried to do, but not you as a person. You don't identify with the failure. And in the same sense, if you're the boss talking to somebody who's you're the supervisor of, that person isn't the person you're upset at. It's maybe the performance that you need to help correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's the difference between you versus I. Hey, you, Jim, I don't think you're doing a good job. That's defensive. But if I come into you and says, hey, Jim, I think we need to sit down and evaluate what's going on here. Here's something that I think you may be able to do better. Whole different reaction to you. I'm sure you had the emotional reaction. Well, I just say, Jim, you're terrible.
Yeah.
You stink. You're not doing a good job.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's not good leadership.
Right.
That's putting a person down. You don't put the person down. It's like when my late wife Key and I were raising our children. That was very key for us, is not to attack them as their person, because they're so fragile today. And that's what I'm seeing in our culture today. These young people are getting all this information about who and what they should be instead of focusing in on whose they are, as who created them and who made them and what kind of plan that our God has for them, rather than what this culture has. And this culture is destroying these young people.
Yeah. Man, I feel like we can go in a lot of different directions. Let me summarize.
Okay.
Let me close on the prep part of this, of your story. Last question in regards to prep. Any special memories that you have about your time as a Rambler? Anything that outside of football, academics, what's your one thing that maybe?
Well, it's probably friends.
Yeah.
You know, and that's true at Notre Dame. It's true when I was in the Green Bay Packers. And Friday, I'm heading to Canton for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Not that I'm being inducted. I'll never see that. But Cliff Branch was a teammate of mine. So a lot of the Raiders are going down, invited by Mark Davis. So there's that friendship that was back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's the same way at Prep. You know, Jim Flanagan, Gary Lillis. I see Gary Lillis when I come into town. Dr. Brian Stark, even though we're not the same age, it's Prep and Notre Dame.
Right, yes.
And he was the leprechaun. So it's Joe Buffalino. Yeah. So you establish this. Barry Masterson. We're on the same football team.
Yeah.
So there's that little group of guys that you can always connect. Now, there was a period of time where I didn't see these guys for a long time because we got busy, they got jobs, they're all over the place, I'm traveling all over the place. But I would say in the last 20 years, we're starting to reconnect when we came back to Prep with some of the reunions and stuff, and we're still friends today. And I saw Barry, and you know, I talked with Joe, and you know, I came back from reunion last year, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of those connections. You know, even guys ahead of me like Joe Maloney. You know, I knew Joe. He was a great athlete when he was at Prep. You know, he became an FBI agent, and you know, we talk. You know, a couple times every few months we touch base.
Yeah.
So it's that friendship thing. Now, as far as experiences, wow, I had so many of them. You know, just what I learned at Prep. The rallies, you know, they were phenomenal at Prep, and it was tough. I mean, it was a tough school.
Yeah.
But that set the foundation for what I was going to do at Notre Dame in the NFL.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. I just want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to everyone who contributed towards our annual fund this past fiscal year. Your financial support allows us to continue to serve our students and be able to continue to fulfill our mission. You know, and that mission statement is with a foundation of faith, family, excellence, and tradition. We develop men and women of vision in spirit, mind, and body. And when you contribute to our annual fund, you partner in that mission with us. You become a part of the mission. And we just want to thank you, because without those contributions, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And just a message of encouragement: if you have never looked into giving to our annual fund before, I encourage you to do so at this fiscal year. We appreciate all the support, and again, when you give to our annual fund, you partner with us in our mission to develop these kids and to do what we do here. So, but yeah, just want to send a quick shout out and thank you to everyone again. So let's get back to this episode of the podcast and continue on with my conversation with Cathedral Prep graduate Mike McCoy. So now you were looking to go into Notre Dame, you signed your letter of intent, and then Ara Parsegian wrote you a note and sent a picture. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I still have that picture today. And it says, "Welcome to the Notre Dame family, Ara Parsegian."
And why was that so important to you?
Well, because my family is always important to me. I grew up in a Polish neighborhood. I grew up with my grandparents on East 23rd Street, John Spraga, John L. Spraga and Alice, and my mom, Polish, and Uncle Ed and Uncle Joe, and my cousins, Jim Spraga and John Spraga. So we had a very family-oriented on East 23rd Street.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad was a great guy, and, you know, he had some issues, but my family, you know, surrounded me. My family at St. John's grade school surrounded me. So that was always very important to me, is that whole concept of family.
Now, earlier you were talking about the impact of your faith.
Right.
Was faith something that was, I guess, always with you when you grew up? Was it more prevalent when you were at Prep or Notre Dame?
Well, I think for me, James, I was an altar boy.
Okay.
And even though I snuck some of the wine at St. John's, I confess. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Yeah.
And so it was more of a duty and obligation, even though I enjoyed it. It was comforting to me, my faith, but it was always something that I had to do. And so when I went off to high school at Cathedral Prep, you know, we had the philosophy courses, the theology courses. So you're exposed to a lot of different philosophies, the theologies that are out in our culture today. And I think sometimes you start questioning things, which I think is good.
Yeah.
Because just to accept something because your parents did it or Father Tellers says you do it, so you started doing evidence that demands a verdict, and that was one of the books I read in 1971.
Wow.
But we're talking a little bit prior to here when I was in prep, and the whole concept of being an example and a mentor. So that was okay that we start questioning things, but I never lost my faith. Because you started questioning some things, and finally came to the conclusion, yeah, this is pretty real. Yeah. And then when I went out to the University of Notre Dame, of course, you had a little more philosophy courses and theology courses, and there are a lot of guys from different faith backgrounds out there at Notre Dame at the time. And so you started continue to go to Mass, continue to have that influence in your life. And then when I went up to the Green Bay Packers, I met Bart Starr and Carol Dale. And they invited me to the chapel program. And I didn't even know that existed in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it's been around since the 50s. Raymond Berry and Bill Glass were kind of the guys who started it.
Okay.
And every team that I knew at the time traveled with a priest or had a local priest come in.
Oh, wow.
So I would go to Mass on Saturday night. And then I go to this thing called chapel because, I'm playing against Walter Payton and the Bears and what help I can get. And so I started going to this chapel, and there were basically business people and former players who would come in there and talk about their faith, whatever faith they were involved with. But what was key was that they made a choice. They made a decision. And one of the things that I speak about when I go into the Catholic schools is John Paul II says, do not fear, open your heart to Christ. Conversion is a personal decision, accepting the saving grace of Christ and becoming his follower.
Yeah.
So they made that choice in their heart, regardless of their faith background. And I don't think I ever did that. I went through the sacraments, I went through confirmation, being an ambassador. We talked about being an ambassador for Christ. Confirmation talks about that. But it wasn't honed into me that I understood that, like, Mike, you need to make a commitment. I made a commitment to my family, I made a commitment to my faith, I made a commitment to who I was as an individual, but I never really made a commitment to Christ. And so through that experience that I opened my heart and asked Christ to come into my life, and how that path changed me. And then that my faith became alive. My had tos became my want tos. Yeah. And so I finally understood that none of us can be perfect, and we got those 10 commandments that are out there, and if you look at lust at another person, you commit adultery. I said, holy mackerel, I am in trouble. And so the 10 commandments are out there. It says the wages of sin is death, because no one can be perfect. So that's why Jesus died on the cross. Now, I knew Jesus died on the cross, but understanding that he became sin for me on that cross was very powerful for me. Yeah. And I said, wow, he paid the price through the shedding of his blood. Because you look at the Old Testament, what was the shedding of the blood? It was the lamb for the atonement of sins. Even though Abraham in Genesis, he believed and he was made righteous, so the whole belief thing was back there. Yeah. And so when I went up to Green Bay, I remember seeing John 3:16, and I didn't know what that was, but John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And God sent his Son to the world not to condemn the world, but to save the world. And I felt condemned a lot. And that condemnation doesn't come from God; it comes from the powers, the evil powers, and they're out there. We have spiritual battles all the time. Right. And those who believe, those who do not believe, are already condemned. So it's that belief in who Jesus is. He's the Son of God. He came down upon this earth to save us from our sins, so we can have eternity with him. And then you take that motivation, and he says, I have works for you. It says in Galatians with the Apostle Paul, who was Saul. He was a pretty bad guy. Yeah. But God already called him long before he was Paul. Yeah. And he already had a plan for him. And he had that dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus. And in Galatians, he says, well, God called me, even when he was Saul. And so that was a real key for me, and how that strengthened my faith and the walk that I had.
So cool to hear. And now you were mentioning, so now you were with the Packers, right? So you were talking about that and part of your faith journey is being a chapel and whatnot. I would imagine going into the Packers organization as the number 2 overall pick, there was a lot of pressure associated with it. Obviously, faith, I'm sure, was a big part of your journey in terms of handling that pressure. What else helped you get through that time where there was a lot of pressure, I'm sure, on you? Yeah.
Well, I had some really good. I'm pretty sure we talked about mentors before. Yes. Errol being a mentor in a certain way, and he says, there's no circumstance that we cannot overcome. Right. And so it was Donnie Anderson, and Donnie was a running back, and he and Jim Taylor were drafted to be the next Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor, Grabowski.
Oh, okay.
And, Jim Grabowski. So it was Grabowski and Donnie Anderson were drafted to be the next Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor, for those of us old enough to understand back then. And so there's a lot of pressure on him, and I met him at the Coaches All-American game in Lubbock, Texas. And he came up to me and he said, welcome to Green Bay. And I got up to Green Bay, and of course, all the sports writer, whatever people say about you, he says, don't worry about it. You do the best you can on the field. So you're a great football player, and it'll all work out.
Yeah.
And so instead of looking at the circumstances around me and the pressure, focusing in on the skills that God has given you and what you learned at Notre Dame from Joe Yanto and Era and Johnny Ray, and just give it your best shot that you can.
Yeah.
And had some injuries on the way, but you work through those injuries and you just keep on keeping on.
Right.
So I did 7 years with Green Bay, and then I was traded to the Oakland Raiders.
Oh, okay.
And they gave up a number 1 draft choice for me and a player.
Wow.
Yeah. And
what year was this?
1977.
77, okay.
I had 7 years with Green Bay. Raiders won the Super Bowl in January of 77. So in August, I'm a Raider with John Madden.
Wow.
And 2
what
years
was that like?
It was like, well, let me put it this way. It was like going from purgatory to heaven. I love Green Bay, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was difficult. Dan Devine was there, tough. Even though we won a Central Division title, Bart took over a team that had no draft choices. So I was under Bart for a year. We didn't do very well, and then I'm shipped off, and I'm on a championship team. And this team was voted the best team first 50 years in the NFL. That 77 team.
Wow.
There's 8 guys from the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
On that team. And
yeah.
This Saturday, August 5th, I'm heading to Canton to be part of Cliff Branch's induction ceremony with a bunch of other Raiders.
How cool is that?
So unfortunately, I got traded again to New York because Troy Archer was a defensive tackle for the Giants. He got killed in an auto accident. Had a few beers,
geez.
and it was towards the end of training camp, and all of a sudden they need a 4-3 tackle. I was a nose tackle, and there was 3 of us, and whatever they worked out, I already paid for my family to come out to it's Tom Flory's first year because I've had 2 years with John Madden. They're in Oakland, and I'm in New Jersey on an exhibition game on a Thursday night. It was 60 degrees.
Oh my gosh!
And we started 10 days later this season.
Wow.
So.
And now the NFL was different during this time, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, during the offseason, you worked like a job, like a normal job. It's not like today's NFL for people who are familiar with it today. I guess in terms of like a leadership thing, how did you manage your time between your family, being ready for an NFL season?
Right.
You played 11 seasons. Like it's
Right.
not just like you were there for a couple of years.
Right.
How did you learn to manage your time and be responsible and do those things?
Well, when we came back, and we had a little apartment on 5th in Washington, and I worked for Security People's Bank, so I would get off and I would work out.
Yeah.
And Gary Knott is a good friend of mine now. He just started Nautilus downtown Erie, so I started working on the Nautilus and running over at Strong Vincent High School, run up and down the steps.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Up and down those hills, just training, and we had a little training manual, and Green Bay says, here's the test. You're going to see how far you can run in 12 minutes, and we know if you've been in shape or not, if you can do it in this amount of time. So that was it.
Oh my gosh!
I never heard from him again.
Yeah.
And so then the following off season, we decided to stay in Green Bay, establish our family up there within the Packer organization. And my late wife Kia's family is from Wisconsin, so we had family already up there.
Oh, neat.
And we did, and I worked different jobs, real estate, banking again, and then got into sales. And about 2 years, the 3 years I was in sales, 1 year I made more money than I did playing in the NFL.
What kept you in the NFL then if you're making more money
Yeah,
outside of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
Because I had things I wanted to accomplish. I enjoyed what I did, and Green Bay was, we're still fighting for that championship,
Yeah.
And they're the title town, and people in Green Bay were great, and it just became part of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Really, you train and you work, and then season comes, and you're a Packer, and it opens the doors for a lot of other things, a lot of speaking engagements that I had, and my faith, and so it just opened up. And actually, even today, it continues to open up doors.
I'm sure you even say,
in the NFL.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably looking back now, you don't regret a second of it because it has created a great platform for you to be able to speak to others based on the accomplishments you've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only regret I had is my first play of my second year. I was on a slant, and the big offensive tackle from the Giants came down and whacked me in the knee, and I tore meniscus.
Ooh.
And that was the first play of my second year. So I played 3 years on a bad knee, and they finally did surgery.
Finally, after that long.
That was pretty painful.
Oh, I'm sure there's some battle.
It was different. It was different back then. We didn't have the doctors and medical stuff that they have now.
Just put some tape on it, some ice, and get back out there.
Yeah, shoot up your toe with Novocaine, even though you broke it, and go out and play.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to go back to, you were talking about the idea of being an ambassador.
Yes.
So with this podcast format, to me, it's a leadership podcast in a sense that you could have people from, whether they're in high school right now listening to this, they're in college, they're in their workplace, they own the business. I think any one of us can be a leader in the environment we're in. What does it mean to be a good ambassador? Because I think those characteristics that you have go hand in hand to your leadership ability, which, again, being an ambassador is your reputation, which your characteristics. So what do you think it does entail to be a good ambassador?
Well, we've got to understand what an ambassador is. An ambassador is a representative of who they are. And for me, it came, I think, my sophomore, junior at Prep. And I had someone come up to me and want an autograph. I said, "What do you want my autograph for?" It's like an 8th grade kid from, where he says, "You're Mike McCoy." I said, "Yeah, so?" And I just it didn't hit me that these people in Erie were looking at me and, developing a reputation on the football field and wrestling, that they want my autograph. I said, "Okay." So I really understood that I represent McCoys, the Spragas, the city of Erie. I represent my faith as an ambassador. Not that I'm a perfect person, because there's probably people out there who can tell you that Mike McCoy may not be a perfect person, but I understood that concept, what it meant to be ambassador. And so when you're in the job, when you're in the workforce, and you're working for whatever company or whatever business, you represent that business and everything that you do. So when you have that consciousness of effort, of understanding that ambassador, when you do things, and when you go out there and do sales, or you go out there and represent business plan, it's excellence. It's always searching for that excellence and no shortcuts. And not that you could go out and have a few beers with your friends or have fun. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is understanding that there's a deeper meaning to that ambassadorship.
Right. Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense.
Because the scriptures talk about that.
Yeah.
We're ambassadors for Christ.
Right.
Yeah. That was another one that hit me when I was growing up too.
Yeah. Absolutely. That makes sense. And no, I think it's important just to always keep that in mind. And what you do, you represent, who you're working for, whatever you're doing, your family. I mean, there's a lot that can go into that.
Absolutely.
So beyond the NFL, you played, 11 years, and then what did you do after that? So before you started Mike McCoy Ministries, what were you doing after the NFL?
I knew my career was coming to an end. I mean, we know that happens.
Yeah.
And so when I was traded from Oakland to New York Giants, I got hurt a lot. I played 4 games. I was a starter and blew out a knee, so I was in a cast for a while. And then I came back and played again, and I had elbow surgery, and I was a starter again, beginning of my 11th year. And the same guy who got my knee got my thigh, so I missed 7 or 8 games. And then I was put on waivers, and the Detroit Lions picked me up.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that.
prior to that time, when I was in Wisconsin, my late wife and I were talking about, what did I want to do? And I thought I was going to continue in the school supply business, because her uncle was one of the board members of this company, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. It's one of those God things. And you look back and say, man, why didn't that work out? But then you look at where you are today and say, if I would have went down that path, I wouldn't have the experiences I have today.
Yeah. And
so I got up to New York and found out about raising kosher veal calves. And I said, And so because I was injured, I was able to go to this company called Provimi in New Jersey and check it out. And so I looked around where we were in Wisconsin. A lot of the dairy farmers were converting their barns to kosher veal. And because I didn't want to travel, I said I was looking for a business. And so when I came back to Erie, I found one in Wattsburg, and I was also managing partner of Kings Court Racquetball Club.
Oh, wow.
I was one of the partners, and I was also the managing partner. So I worked there, and I worked the farm. Unfortunately, it was early 80s.
Yeah.
And we had a guy named Jimmy Carter, and our economy was crashing like it is today. Same scenario. And so my market dried up.
Okay.
So I said, I got to shut this down. cut the losses and got a nice little farm. So I was able to make a trade with the guy who owned the farm, and we moved to Northeast at the time. And so I started a weight loss business because I gained a lot of weight. And then I got into finance business with a company called Copeland. And I was very successful with that for 2-3 years. And then in 1986, one of the guys from NFL Chapel, they were kind of behind the scenes organizing Chapel, called me and says we wanted to start a ministry called Sports World and take the platform of the foreign NFL into schools, because he saw the deterioration in our culture at that time. So I was with them for 3 years, and then went with Bill Glass for 19 years. And I think we talked about that. I'm not sure about Bill Glass, the mentorship, how you learn, and how I learned through Bill doing what I'm doing today to run a nonprofit organization. So I was 19 years with Bill, and then the recession hit. In 2007, 2008, I'm 60 years old, I get laid off. I mean, hey, wait a minute, I'm Mike McCoy, that's not supposed to happen, right? And I said, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And I was in a Catholic school in Marin County at the time, under the umbrella of Bill Glass, because I spoke in prisons, Catholic schools, public schools. I trained pros how to speak, and I was one of the managers. And they asked me to run their organization 3 times. I said, I'm not moving to Dallas. Shoot, I lost to Texas my senior year. I don't want to go back there. And my senior year at Big 33 game. And Texas wasn't for me at the time. And so I got caught in that. And so God opened the doors for Mike McCoy Ministries. And it was pretty seamless. Reaching students in Catholic schools with the message of faith, hope, and encouragement. We do that through an assembly setting. I got 2 programs. Value and worth of a person through God's eyes, grades 3 through 5, and then decisions determine our destiny, grades 6 through 12. And so that's been a real blessing, and not easy, obviously, but it's a one-man show pretty much. But I've got a pretty good board, and I've got a donor base that's okay. So we don't charge the schools anything, and we go out there and, the last 11 years we've intervened in over 430 students who were contemplating suicide. A lot of depression out there right now, a lot of social media the last 3 years, and it's the culture is destroying our young people. So when I have that value and worth, because I do carry that theme into the 6 through 12, the value and worth is, God knew us before we were formed in our mother's womb. He knit us in our mother's womb. We're made in God's image and likeness. We have value and worth through Him, and He has a plan and purpose for our life. And so when you look at that from our Creator versus what this culture is offering these young people, it's not a slam dunk, but it gives them some, wait a minute, I need to focus on that rather than focus on what my friends want me to do and what this culture tells me to do. And we're talking about prep, the friends. Again, I think we talked about that in some of the guys, but that whole friendship thing is really big today in the social media. So it's where we put our focus.
Well, and that's a great thing. That's just a good lesson in anything is, where your focus goes, energy flows, right? So in terms of your priorities and what you make, it's something that you want to pursue and be better at. A lot of it has to do with just turning off your phone for a little bit and actually thinking about some of your goals you have long term, and then deciding. We were talking about your schedule earlier, like when you were in the NFL and you had to work. You had to figure out, if I'm going to stay in the NFL, I need to do this, this, and this. How do I do that in my schedule? So all those things, kind of add up. I was reading a little bit about your story before sitting down with you, and I know when you decided to step away from the business world and pursue working in this ministry, I think you said it was a pay cut and it was a big leap of faith for you.
My wife actually went to work as a teller in Northeast Pennsylvania.
So what would you say to somebody who's maybe contemplating on something that maybe it's not in a situation where it's a pay cut, but it's a big leap of faith? Maybe they want to start a business, or they want to shoot for a promotion, or they want to go somewhere in life that they're maybe afraid that what's going to happen to the outcome. What would you say to that person?
Well, I was afraid of leaving Bill Glass and starting on my own, because there was nothing. So I had some friends, and we talked to them, and they said, we're going to help you. And so it's that mentorship again. It's coming back to not taking that leap of faith by yourself. Proverbs talks about having a group of counselors, but not having too many, and really believing in your gut that this is something you're going to do, and you're going to take that risk. Because it's risk reward. If it doesn't work out, Edison had 2,000 failures with the light bulb, and Michael Jordan didn't make the team his sophomore year in high school, and so it's you just says, okay, what's the next thing out there? How many people have gone bankrupt and they're multimillionaires today? So it's not easy, but you try to plan as best you can, and you give it your best shot.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And, any of us naturally have those hesitations when it comes to something we want to shoot for and aim for. But when you do have people in your corner supporting you, encouraging you, having a good environment around you that is conducive to you growing and having that growth mindset that, I'm so key on in terms of making those decisions. So, I guess we'll kind of start to wrap up here on, this. I guess, just the last couple questions I have for you. So what's one thing that, if you could sit down with somebody today who is an aspiring leader, it kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with the question I just asked, but what advice would you give somebody who wants to pursue a better career for their life, wants to, maybe they're stuck in where they're at? What advice would you give somebody who wants to, because you've accomplished so much in your life, you've taken so many turns in your story between the businesses you were talking about and all these different areas. I mean, that was probably an area of life where you were still figuring it out, you're still getting things going. What advice would you have for somebody sitting here today that does want to, pursue a better life?
Well, we have to have a balance, our faith, our family, and our friends, and having that balance in our life, in our character, and our values. Again, going back to being an ambassador, we honed in on that a lot. And so if someone's sitting here, if you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, and you have that strong faith background, you have that relationship with our Creator. Because see, when Jesus left this earth, he says, I'm sending you the Paracletus, and that was the helper, the Holy Spirit in our heart. And I've sometimes listened to the Holy Spirit, sometimes I have not, and when I have not is when I screwed up. But that takes a group of people around you to discern that, and prayer, and having that strong faith background. And it's just not faith in something or you, it's in faith in who Christ is in our life. And that we manifest that through, and he has a plan for us, and he has works for us. And so I would say I would start with that. If you don't have that faith, then you're out there in the world and you're trying to do it according to world standards, and that doesn't work sometimes, because we all get caught up in some bad decisions sometimes. Because we want to make it, and got to have that money, you got to have that prestige, and then it comes back and haunts us.
Don't get caught up in the world's pressure, the system. That's the best way to say it. So last question for you. It's kind of a fun one, but so if you could go in a time machine back to 1966. So you're going to be given the commencement speech at your graduation. What would be the message you'd want to pass on to your class that you're graduating with? What, if you, knowing what you know now also, what would you like to say to those?
So if I was in front of my classmates?
What would you like to say to those guys?
It's been a great run with you.
It's
been fun at Prep, the things we learned at Prep, the character, the values, the people we've met there. Again, I go back to that faith. It always comes back to faith. Not the faith that some people think, but it's the personal relationships that we have with each other and with our faith, but also that personal relationship we have with Jesus Christ. Because he is the rock. He's the solid foundation.
Amen.
One of the scripture verses talk about does a man build his house upon, the sand or the rock? Sand is the world system, or the rock is the person of Jesus Christ. Because when the trials and tribulation of life come, great will be the fall of that person who's built his house on the sand. And who's built his house upon the rock. Now you may be hanging on to that rock sometimes rather than standing on it, but that house will never fail. He'll never leave us, nor forsake us.
Oh, that's so good. Absolutely. Well, and I think one of the things that you were hitting on too with this all is the brotherhood or the friendships you said about Prep. And I think that's the one thing that people ask my time looking back on it, it's the brotherhood. And whether you're a Prep alum or somebody who went to Villa, I talk about the sisterhood, how important those factors are. And then for you to kind of tie it together and say that relationship with
I'm excited to see where Prep goes, because Notre Dame was an all-male school, and then it went co-ed in '73. So I was actually in the last dorm, Walsh Hall, that they converted to the first women's dorm.
Oh, wow.
It took about a year and a half to convert it. And my daughter Molly had the opportunity to go to Notre Dame for a few years. So if it was an all-male school, she wouldn't have had that opportunity. Well, that's funny too, because I have two boys and one girl and another girl in the way. So now for me to say, hey, my girls actually get to be going to Prep one day, it's actually pretty cool. So that's cool.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for the time. Really
James,
appreciate you taking time away from your family here at Camp Pitch again. Really appreciate it, and imparting some wisdom for all of us today. And best of luck all the way.
Go
with
online,
everything.
Camp Pitch, and send your kids out here. It's tremendous.
Beautiful out here. Yes. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast with Mike McCoy. What a great amount of wisdom that we were able to receive from Mike based on all his, tremendous accomplishments. So can't say thank you again, Mike, for taking the time to come on the podcast as a guest. But I am happy to share with you that episode 5 of the Rambler Podcast is going to be released on September 19th, featuring Cathedral Prep faculty member Ruth Oligiri. Ruth started teaching at Villa Maria Academy in September of 1996, and she was one of the first teachers to teach at both campuses of Cathedral Prep and Villa Maria Academy when the schools first merged back in 2010. She has some great experiences to share from her time at Villa and her time at Prep, and she'll also talk about what she is most looking forward to this school year with all the changes happening in the school, first year being co-ed at Prep, the new building. So it's going to be a fun conversation to share with you from her perspective being a faculty member. And actually, Ruth will also be this year's honoree for our Harvest Gala event, which is taking place on September 24th. For those of you who don't know what Harvest Gala is, this is a time for women of Prep to come together in support of our schools. Each year, we honor the legacy of Mrs. Joanne Mullen, who is a 1957 Villa Maria grad, by recognizing a woman of Cathedral Prep, Villa Maria Academy, or Mother Teresa Academy who has fostered service, strong moral character, global leadership, and esteemed academic success among our students. Mrs. Mullen wasn't just a Villa Maria alum, but she was also a longtime faculty member and administrator at both Villa Maria and Cathedral Prep. So it's a truly great event in support of the schools and being able to bring people together for this cause. And 100% of the funds we raise from this go to the Joanne Mullen Scholarship Fund. So it's a really great cause as well. Tickets are still available on our website too. So stay tuned for that episode and enjoy that podcast episode as it comes out. But thank you so much again for listening. God bless and roll Ramblers.